Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Govs on the Go Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the dean of the college. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mason Devers, who graduated with a communications degree back in 2018. Mason, welcome to the show, and so good to talk with you today.
Thanks, Dean Hoon. I appreciate you all having me on the podcast and looking forward to today's conversation. I'm long ways from Austin Peay right now, but it's always great to talk to fellow governors. So,
absolutely. Well, hello from Clarksville. We've got lots to talk about. Let's give everybody a life update. Where are you and what's going on?
Yeah, I live in Washington, D.C. and work on Capitol Hill. I am a communications director for House Republican Conference Chairwoman Lisa McClain. She represents a district in Michigan, but was elected last year to serve in House leadership. And so I've been working for her since August of 2024.
That's terrific. Okay. So that's where you are now. Let's rewind everything, go back in time, talk a little bit about you were born and raised in Clarksville. So you have a good perspective, not only on Clarksville, but also Austin Peay has been in your history for a long period of time. Let's talk a little bit about what it was like growing up and what kind of things did you like to do?
Yeah, I don't feel like it's as common to find native Clarksvillians living in Clarksville anymore. It is such a transient town, just with the military base being there and the university and everything. But my dad's side of the family has been in Clarksville for generations, and
Wow.
my mom's father was in the military and retired at Fort Campbell, and so that was how they both ended up there. But Clarksville will always be home. A lot of my family still lives there, so I still come back to visit often. In fact, I was just there for Thanksgiving, and we'll be coming back for Christmas. So always glad to come home and see family. But went through the public school system there in Clarksville and ended up going to Rossview High School, and really enjoyed growing up there. I always kind of call Clarksville a melting pot as well, just with the military base being there. You have people from all over, the country and everything. So, but was heavily involved in the community growing up. Was involved in church and scouting and just other things through school sports. I played tennis in high school and also baseball growing up. So the community, I feel like, really shaped me, into who I am today. And so it's just been amazing to see it continue to grow. And at some points is kind of unrecognizable from when I was a kid. So.
Well, I like to think that all the things that you were involved in as a young person helped impact you and maybe gave you some direction, because a lot of the things you mentioned talked about leadership, developing your leadership qualities. In fact, you were in a program that I think very highly of, which was the Youth Leadership Clarksville program. And I'm sure that gave you exposure to other people within the community as well that helped, as a very early person, helped imprint on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of had a calling toward, being involved in kind of public service. I think a lot of it just stems from kind of coming from a military family. Like I said, my mom's dad retired at Fort Campbell. My dad's father was also in the military. My uncle, who grew up in Clarksville, graduated from Clarksville High and went on to attend West Point. So just have a lot of, figures in my life that were in the military. And so public service and just kind of being involved was always kind of instilled in us, if you will. And Youth Leadership Clarksville was a really great program because, as a high schooler, obviously, you've grown up. I grew up in Clarksville, but still didn't know everything that was there and kind
Mhm.
of all the intricacies of the city and just kind of how all the pieces make things run. And so, we were able to learn more about Fort Campbell, more about the school system, city and county government. We went and visited several small businesses. And so, it was kind of very educational to see day in and day out kind of the different components of society and how they all kind of make the city run, if you will.
Was there a point where you kind of came to the realization that you had an interest in politics?
Yeah, I would say it was probably when I was a little kid.
Hmm.
I grew up a lot of my summers with my grandparents. Both my parents worked full time, and so my grandparents would babysit us, during the week while my parents were at work. And so, both sets of my grandparents always had the news on, and so that was always interesting to me and kind of just like staying up to date with current events. But my grandfather was also on the local election commission there in Montgomery County for a period of time and, was pretty politically active. And so I think just spending a lot of time around him, and like I said, just really staying in tune with what was kind of going on in the news from a young age really got me interested in staying active politically. And it's kind of the career path that I've taken. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rossview, which is a wonderful high school, and I think you mentioned a teacher that helped also uh, give you some positive motivation.
Yeah, I had an English teacher my sophomore year. Her name was Miss Job, Lexi Job. And in high school, as you got into your junior and senior year and kind of had like a free period, where you might have, you don't have to take an extra class that year. You could be what was called a teacher's aide in one of the teacher's classrooms. And so I was actually an aide in her class my junior and senior year of high school, if I remember correctly. And so obviously, spent a lot of time with her and she was actually the one that encouraged me to apply for the PELP program or President's Emerging Leaders program at Austin Peay because she had been in it during her time at Austin Peay. And if I'm remembering this correctly, it might have been a pretty new program
Mhm.
when she started. And so just kind of hearing her talk about the program and, what it did for her and kind of the doors that it opened, um, you know, having grown up there, I was kind of anxious to maybe get out of Clarksville for a little while. And so
Sure.
I had applied to some other schools and gotten accepted. But ultimately, if I'm not jumping the gun here, the PELT program was kind of what got me to stay in Clarksville and attend Austin Peay.
Well, no, that's great. I always find it interesting what was the attraction, and I'm thankful for that because the Pell program is a wonderful addition to what we provide for our students. But you found so many other ways to get involved besides just the Pell program. I think it's really interesting to find out, for instance, you're involved with a fraternity and what sort of that provided to your personal development as well.
Yeah, I was a member of ATO or Alpha Tau Omega. It's a leadership fraternity. I mean, it is Greek as well, but one thing that we really tout is that it is a leadership fraternity, and we really focus on instilling leadership skills in our brothers and our members that join. Um, you know, Kind of talking about staying in Clarksville. I had grown up there, and so when I went to college, I really wanted to focus on meeting new people. Not that I didn't like the people obviously that I had grown up with, but I feel like college is kind of a time for you to experience new things and grow. And so I kind of saw joining a fraternity as a way to meet new people and not always kind of hang out with the people that I had grown up with or gone to high school with. And it was a great experience. It taught me a lot. I think it was my sophomore year. I was elected, by my brothers as treasurer of the fraternity, and then my junior year was elected president. And so was a great opportunity to kind of develop those leadership skills. And I always tell people it really is kind of like running a small business because, you have members that are paying dues and then, you have to budget those dues and, come up with an annual budget for the year. And, you're running weekly meetings and those kinds of things, but also One of my favorite parts about being in the fraternity was our philanthropy stuff that we did. Our big one for ATO there at Austin Peay was St. Jude's Children's
Oh,
Hospital down in
terrific.
Memphis. And I think over my 4 years, we raised over $100,000 for the
Wow.
hospital. And, we would go down once a year and take the check and present it. And, going to tour the hospital and just seeing the difference that the hospital makes for so many families who I'm sure are feeling, it's probably one of the worst times in their lives. And so, it was just a very humbling experience, but just knowing, that we were able to make a small impact for them was great.
Wow, that is terrific. Wonderful that you did that because I think so highly of that organization as well. I guess it was a natural lead into student government as well.
It was, yeah. I was in student government in high school, and like I said, I'm just a big believer that, when, I felt like Clarksville gave so much to me and wanted to give back. And kind of at the point that I decided to join student government, I felt like, Austin Peay had kind of given me a lot at that point out, and I wanted to find another way to kind of give back to campus and continue to stay involved. And ended up, becoming a part of the judicial tribunal there on student government. And it was great to be a part of helping plan, some of the annual campus-wide events that we would have every year, whether it was like Mud Bowl or Ghosts that they do around Halloween
Yep.
for kids in the community, and just staying involved. And I got to work a lot with our dean of students at the time, who was kind of the advisor for student government, Greg Singleton, and he had a big impact on me there at Austin Peay, and we still stay in touch pretty regularly. So.
Yeah, terrific individual as well. One of the kind of unique things is your connection in the communications department with Austin Peay Television. I found out just today, talking with faculty members, that you thought about this particular show. Let's start a show where we can talk about and involve political viewpoints, which is so unusual, again, from a young person to have that initiative. Do you remember when you proposed it, what the reaction was?
I don't necessarily remember the reaction, but I don't remember it being negative. I'll say that. The professors seemed pretty open to it, but they kind of let me run with the idea. Of course, I came with the initial proposal, but then they were like, "Yeah, I think you need to develop this a little bit more, and then once you have something a little bit more concrete, let's sit down again and kind of talk about it." But as I kind of mentioned, the news is obviously it was important to me as a kid, but just in the communications field that we work in, it kind of rules a lot of what we do. And so one of my favorite shows has always been The Five on Fox News, and it's kind of like a roundtable discussion, and typically tends to be their show that has the highest ratings. And so I think it's very important that in a time where politics has become so partisan, that you kind of have a show that's going to highlight different points of view. So,
And let's talk a little bit about some of your professors because when I talked with all of them, have such fond memories of you involved in so many different ways. Talk about some of the people that were impacting you during your time here.
yeah, I would say he's outside the department, but one of the biggest professors that had an impact on me was Dr. Matt Kinney. At the
Yeah.
time, he was the head of the Pell program, and really encouraged me, throughout my entire college journey. And then I ended up switching my major. I started out poli sci when I started Austin Peay, and then switched to comms my sophomore year. And Karen Bullis was probably one of the biggest professors in the comms department that had an impact on me. She taught a lot of our video classes, and at one point I had kind of thought about maybe going into broadcast journalism, but she was always really encouraging and gave us a lot of creative freedom in our classes that we took with her. And just kind of like knowing her background in video, was very inspiring as well. My senior year, you kind of take like a capstone class, if you will. And Dr. Nichols was very integral as well. I was up here in DC doing an internship at the time, so I was taking my capstone class remotely, but we would talk pretty frequently, about once a week, just to kind of like check in about how things were going, and talking through, the assignments that we had. But that class kind of like helps you, for lack of better terms, cap off your undergraduate career. And so she was always great and had great advice. And then another one, I don't think she's there anymore. She was an adjunct faculty at the time, but Amy Richhart was another one that in the comms department. She was teaching I think it was back maybe in 2018 when the midterm elections were going on. She was teaching a political comms class that they had kind of done as like a special class that semester. And so really enjoyed that class as well, just for the nature of course, kind of what I do now. So.
And if I remember correctly, Kathy Houston said that you did election night coverage. Do you
I
remember
did,
that?
yes, for APSU TV. I did. Yeah, that was a part of our class. So.
Yeah. Well, that's just terrific. And, part of what I love about the department is, students can find a way in so many different areas, and finding out about how the press works, how the news works, how it's made, I'm sure is very important to what you do, because you are part of that. You have a message that you want to have delivered.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in my job now, I work day in and day out with reporters, and it really is about navigating the media landscape, if you will. And, that's changing a lot now, but there are still a lot of folks that kind of get their news through traditional outlets. And so those classes, even just from the fundamentals of like writing or a press release, were very important, during my time there in the communications department.
So you mentioned that you went to DC as an intern, which is, and your first job was actually on the Hill, a very challenging first job. I'm wondering, I mean, you didn't start small. You didn't go to Nashville. You went right for the nation's capital. I mean, what inspired you that way, Mason?
Yeah, as we kind of talked a little bit earlier, I've really been interested in politics since a young age. And so, of course, Washington, D.C. is kind of the epicenter of politics
Yeah.
for our country. And Dr. Kinney, he was the liaison for this program called the Washington Center. And it's a program here in D.C. that works with universities around the country. And you come and do an internship for the semester, but you can do a traditional internship just kind of through a House member's office or a senator's office. But the great thing about the Washington Center is, they provide you housing for the semester, but then they also provide you all kinds of other class and educational opportunities throughout the semester. And so I came up here and interned for the House Small Business Committee, excuse me, doing a press focused internship. And so I felt like that kind of really solidified the career path that I wanted to take, and ended up moving back up here as soon as I graduated from Austin Peay. I went back down for graduation in May and came back up in June, and started the job hunt. And it was a little bit of a challenging year for finding a job here on the Hill. Just because of the midterms being that year. And so, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty about which party is going to control Congress after the midterms. And sometimes there's not as much movement going on. And so I ended up taking a job at a consulting firm for a year, and consulted on political campaigns, working on their overall digital, communication strategy, helping out with their digital fundraising and those kinds of things. And so it was very digital heavy. And so my interests more lied in like the traditional aspect of communications, more, the press relations and writing and those kinds of things. And so, all the while was just kind of interviewing and trying to get a job on the Hill. And I think it took about 12 or 13 tries before I landed my first job on the Hill. But there's one thing that my life experiences have taught me, it's perseverance. And so I just, stayed at it and ended up landing a job with a congressman from Texas as his press secretary. So.
Wow, that's terrific. Not only did you do that, which is impressive enough, you decided, I'm going to complicate my life a little bit more and go to grad school. Was that the plan there?
Yeah, so last time I was here in DC, this is actually my second time living here. Last time I was in DC, I was working for Congressman Will Hurd, and when I moved back up here, I started my grad school program in the fall over at George Washington University and got my master's in legislative affairs. Of course, my undergraduate degree at Austin Peay was in communications. And up until that point, my work had been in communications as well, and felt like I wanted to get to know the policy side a little bit better, because I felt like if I knew the policy side better, then I could message the policy better.
Okay.
And the program that I was in was built for working professionals, and so we had classes 3 nights a week. But it was also a unique program, and that I think only one of the faculty members that I had was full time in academia. They were almost all professors of practice, meaning that they worked out in the field during the day and then taught our classes at night. And so I really picked the program because I felt, I was going to be getting that real world experience that I was going to need, and not as much, philosophical education, if you will. And so even had, I think, 2 or 3 former members of Congress teach my classes. So it really was a great and unique program, and I really enjoyed it.
Wow. So let's, explore a little bit about your time because you mentioned this working for Will Hurd. And if I remember correctly in your timeline, COVID happens. And not only COVID happens, but he retires?
He did. He retired after 2020, so he finished at the end of 2020, and of course the world was still pretty much shut down at that
Yeah.
point, and just kind of made the hiring environment up here challenging, just because there was so much uncertainty about kind of what was going on in the world with the pandemic going on and everything. And so that led me to come back to Nashville. So I started big, went small, and then came back big, but ended up going to work in state government for 3 years. And, I had never had experience kind of at the state level. And so it was very interesting to, get to work with all the state lawmakers there in Nashville and with the governor's administration. And I worked for what's now called the Tennessee Department of Disability and Aging, and was never a policy area that I intended to work in, but it was really unique and interesting to get to learn. And I'm not sure if the stat still holds true, but at the time that I was working there, Tennessee was the fastest growing state as far as retirees moving there. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit because I think those are all building blocks for your experience, and along the way, I think it's you're having both challenges and joys. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges of your job because I think that just so people understand, I think they understand in general that the political world is very partisan, but how is it for you to navigate to work in?
It's very interesting. I mean, as you said, we do live in partisan times, and so of course, anytime I talk to folks outside of DC and they ask me what I do. Sometimes I'm a little bit cagey at first on telling them what I do, but at the end of the day, I really think that we've got to start to try and get back to a point in society where it's okay to disagree, and let's have a civil debate and civil
Yeah.
discussion. You know, but it also, the House is a majoritarian institution. It's a partisan institution, and sometimes, it can make my job fun, and we have fun with things sometimes, especially when it comes to, doing things on social media. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, I think one of the most challenging things that we're navigating right now in my job is that the media landscape is changing so much, and where people are getting their news from. Traditionally, TV has kind of been king, but I think you saw in this last election that so many folks are starting to get their news from non-traditional, or what we're calling new media outlets, like podcast
Like the
and streaming
podcast.
services and Substacks and those kinds of things. So that's for sure one of the most challenging things, that we're navigating right now up here, and in communications in general.
I would think that for any new politician, finding the right communications director is essential because, I mean, they come from wherever their background is. Normally, not many of them come from our area in communications. And so, it's really, I think, vital for somebody new to have the ability for somebody else to help tell their story. Is that right?
It is, yeah. It can be really challenging to learn a member's voice or a principal's voice, if you will, because a lot of times, you're having to, write memos for them or talking points or speech or social media posts, and you're having to try and craft it in their voice, not yours. And so that can be a little bit challenging. Two, I had never been to Michigan before I started working for the congresswoman that I work for now. And so, having to learn her district and the demographics of the district and, the media landscape as far as like the print papers and TV stations and radio stations and all those kinds of things. That was a challenge that I had to tackle as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How does a Tennessee boy connect with a congresswoman from Michigan? But I'm sure that what you're bringing to the table is beneficial for her because she's now on the national scene, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. When I worked for Congressman Hurd, he was very active in the media and had a very, niche voice in the party. At the time, he was the only Black Republican in the House. He represented a very competitive district. I think he won his last election by about 900 votes, which is very slim in a congressional election, and was a Black Republican representing a 70% Latino district. And so, was very active in media, and that was kind of what I was looking for when I moved back up here. Was a member that wanted to be active and had goals of moving up and didn't want to kind of just be a what some people call a rank and file member. So.
Okay. So what are some of the joys? What do you look forward to during the day that you say, this is why I do this job?
I think there's several things. One, I think they're very I think the word I want to use, maybe like completion oriented. You kind
Hmm.
of see things that you work on, make it to the finish line or make it to a finished product.
Okay.
Whether that's, you pitch and book the congresswoman on a radio show or a network, and then you do all the prep work, and then kind of see that interview through. It makes it on TV, you clip it, you put it out on social media, maybe you put it in a press release. Um, Maybe it's that, obviously a lot of what we do up here is legislation. And so communications is a tool to help get a piece of legislation passed, to influence getting a piece of legislation passed. And so seeing months of hard work pay off when that bill, gets passed and signed into law. Up here, whether, regardless of how you feel about the bill, we spent the better part of this year passing, the one big beautiful bill or the working families tax cut, which is, been the largest tax cut for Americans in the history of the United States. And so seeing that, come to fruition and get signed into law after months and months of work on it, and kind of battling it out in the media, that's very rewarding for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes do you reflect upon that? Here you are on the national scene, this young man that grew up in Clarksville with the interest in politics, and now you're involved in some as you're part of the machinery now.
Absolutely. It is very surreal. And, not just getting legislation passed, but during my time here in DC, just being here for historic events and witnessing things that, not everybody gets to be here for.
Yep.
While I've been here, we've had a couple of former presidents pass. And so, being able to see like George H.W. Bush lie in state and Jimmy Carter, those have been very, great experiences to be a part of. Obviously, it's sad, that they passed, but being able to be here and kind of witness those things has been great.
Well, even though you are sort of a one of a kind, I would say, Mason, I'm going to ask if you could relate some and provide some advice to students that maybe along the way that say, you know what, I think that's what I want to do. What kind of advice do you have for students?
Number one, I would say, get involved as much as you can, because that's how you're going to meet people and make connections.
Hmm.
I hear the Congresswoman say this very often, and it's so true. Life is all about relationships. And so I would encourage students to get involved as much as they can on campus, and make those connections. Two, I would say, is to make sure that you do internships throughout your college experience. Those were very integral in kind of leading me to find out what I was really interested in pursuing as a career. And, I did a couple internships that helped me figure out what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But also, after you graduate college, so many people are looking for people entering the job market that already have experience. And so, that was a word that I heard a lot as I was job interviewing right out of college. And so I would really encourage students to get internships.
Well, you've mentioned to the department before, and we appreciate that you are a resource for our students, and we're thankful to have you as an alum and also to have you on the podcast today. It's been a great talk.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers out there for checking out the podcast. We hope you will join us again as we profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.